Hello, and welcome to my first video. I'm just going to jump straight into it because I don't know how to do a little intro thing. Maybe I will in future, give a bit of background, but we're just going to jump straight into it. So my song, Geordie Greep's Perfect 10 album. A big claim, people, throw around ratings and perfect 10s, perfect albums quite a lot. But I think as much as ratings are helpful, and obviously people, for decades have rated albums. The interview that he said this on was with Pitchfork, they've been around for decades and famously changed their ratings of albums. I think it's nicer to talk about the music, and that's what people enjoy more about rating albums or comparing them and hearing influences. And he does. It's only in like a short, like a YouTube short that he talks about it. But he goes into some good depth about, why he would give this album a perfect 10 rating. I'm not going to say that I agree or I disagree with him, but it's a very good album. We'll start with that. So, yeah, my song, Keith Jarrett, came out in 1978 and is made up of his European quartet, which was mainly, I think they're all Norwegian, potentially Swedish. So, European jazz influences. And Jarrett composed most of the songs himself, and you can sort of hear various eras of jazz throughout it. So 1978, this is just off the back of the fusion era. Free jazz has been around for a while. You can see, you can hear many different eras throughout it. We also have Jan Garbarek on soprano and tenor sax, Paul Danielson on bass, and John Christensen on drums. If I've pronounced any of those wrong, I'm sorry, I probably have. But you should give credit to the musicians who are performing. And in an album like this, definitely, it's great playing all round from them. So I'm just gonna kind of jump into a track by track really, and it's interesting to do that for jazz. Especially when there's, it's a long album. It's only, I think it's 7 songs, but it managed to last over an hour. Jazz is always like 10-minute songs, 12-minute songs, extended solos, and it's mainly Keith Jarrett soloing in this. There is Jan Garbarek. He's got some really nice soprano and tenor sax moments on it. There's a couple little bass solos in there. Not too many drums, but you never, unless you're listening to like some of the greats, you're never going to get that many drum solos. But great drumming throughout. Very minimal, respectful sort of thing. But yeah, the instrumentation all the way through is really good. And so, Questar, probably pronounced that wrong as well. The first song, really, really good opening, I think. You can hear like the elements of free jazz. There's just sort of a relaxed feel throughout. I'm looking down at my notebook, by the way, which I have notes in. The whole album really has a sort of really relaxed, laid back feel. Like it's kind of swung, kind of straight. There's maybe some shuffling in there. It's really. Everyone's just sort of sat back. Everyone's wearing sunglasses playing this, like they've probably smoked a doobie before. You never know. And the sound of the album as well, just before I get into the first song, it has an atmosphere. There's only a quartet, which you'd imagine is sort of a very close-knit sort of sound and cohesive. And it as much as it is, there is a sort of a largeness to it. That it's not filmed in like a small, or recorded, in like a small little club. I sort of imagine it's like some of the basement sessions that are posted on YouTube. Everyone's kind of in a circle, spread apart from each other, but obviously can still see each other and communicate. And it gives it's a really unique sound throughout, and they sound larger than a quartet, especially in later the songs near the end as it sort of builds and builds. But yeah, Questar, there's elements of free jazz, rhythm sections locked in. I mean, it's basically just a rhythm section, and then a saxophone on top. Um, but Keith Jarrett's solos, even in this first one, are just so gorgeous. Really, like I've not heard him overly much aside from this, and the only person I compare him to is Chick Corea, maybe, with that's sort of a little less intense because he, gets into fusion stuff like crazy. And yeah, it's just really, off the bat, I was just blown away by sort of his capability, and also the sound of the piano. I don't know what piano they used. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I'd imagine some stupidly expensive grand piano, but when you're hearing a piano that it's expensive, and it's worth that. And so that it's a long first track. I think it's 7 or 8 minutes. But there's the solo for the sax comes in at just the right time, I think. Especially with jazz, when there's solo and people can sort of get bored of like, solo for him, solo for him, whatever. This album does it really well, where everyone comes in or takes over the song at the right time. And like in this first song, he's Jan's on tenor, I believe. I think there's only 2 songs he's on soprano. But it comes in at the right time. And there's sort of space between all the solos and everything to breathe. And the solos aren't overwhelming, especially on the first song. It's like they're doing just enough to like sort of be like, oh, okay, that's interesting, but not too much that's, it's going to scare you off as sort of like if it's your first introduction to jazz or anything. So the title track as well, speaking of like beautiful playing, probably the best song. If you're gonna listen to anything from it, listen to the title track. It's just like it's 6 minutes, but it feels shorter. Usually I'd say things feel longer, but it feels shorter because I don't know, maybe I enjoy it so much, sort of thing. But the soprano sax that sort of has the lead line it's just the sound of it. I don't know how he gets the tone. It doesn't sound. I didn't think it was a soprano sax at first, because there's this sort of whiny sort of feel to it, or sound, and it's not unpleasant. It sounds nice. It's sort of whiny, but there's a softness to it, and it's just really beautiful. And the piano as well. There's the sort of the dynamic range throughout everything on this album is really, really good. And I think that's what makes it what it is the sort of sensitivity that you can hear. I think that's helped by just being a quartet. But yeah, by far, I think if you're listening to any song, listen to the title track. Tabaka, the next song, has a little bit of a shift. It kind of livens up a bit. There's it starts off with like, I think like congas or something, some kind of percussion instrument. But it's a shift in tone. There's a somber sort of tone. It's the first sort of bass solo you hear as well, which has a nice sort of it adds some space. It's only the drums and the bass are playing at that point for a few bars, and then the other 2 come back in. And the sax and the piano, like, they have a lot of lines, like melodic lines that run the same, and it just sounds really good. I don't know, their chemistry is clearly really, really good. And speaking of which, or literally speaking, you can hear Keith Jarrett sort of whining or singing his what he's playing as he's playing it, and it's not in a George Benson like, kind of scatting along and it sounds really pleasant. It kind of doesn't. It sounds kind of. The first time I heard it, I thought it sounded bad, but I've grown to like it. I think it adds quite a lot to the album, really. I only heard it on this 3rd track, but it is in the 1st track from the start. It's not in the 2nd one. That's why you should probably listen to that one. but it just adds like a little. It's fun, you know. I didn't hear it at first, and I did, and I didn't like it, and then the more I hear it, I'm like, you know, it's just like a funny. I don't know. Music's not meant to be, you know, you're meant to enjoy it, and he's clearly enjoying making the music. So, you know, why can he not show that? It doesn't have to be serious constantly, you know, especially with jazz. Like, it's fun. It's like it's intense, and this does become intense. The Mandala, which isn't the next song, I'll get to it, but Mandala is pretty like an intense. It touches on all areas of jazz as I've talked about, but Mandala's like I didn't expect it to go there. But Country, the next song, is probably the most cheesy one, and you know Geordie Greep talks about jazz being a little bit cheesy, or well Keith Jarrett using sort of cheesy motifs, and you need a bit of like cheesiness. You can't just be playing like these crazy chords or like whatever. There was I forget who it was, but someone was having, it was, I believe it was a college talk. I'll brush up on and find it and link it. And they said, you know, play like a D minor, and they played like this D minor augmented blah whatever, and said no, just play a D minor, and they played it and it sounded better. Surely, you just need to like sort of keep it simple sometimes. But yeah, it's very cheesy. It's sort of like a ballroom sort of dance. I hear it as. There's a bit of a pickup in tone. The drums are a bit busier on this one, and the bass is sort of slow and lumbering. It kind of waltzes around like a sort of a ballroom dance. And there's the parallel like sax and piano lines again. And then there's also a bass solo on this one, which is really, really nice, and it eases some of the sort of tension that builds. There's a constant sort of push and pull in all of the songs as it sort of builds, and then and that's the dynamics that they use on play as well. It kind of goes everywhere. It's very much a headphone listening experience thing. Like I played it through my speakers and it's not quite the same. I'd much rather prefer it with headphones because you can kind of get the gist. I mean, listen to it however you want, but I think to get the full sort of experience with headphones is good, and that sort of big room sort of sound that adds such an atmosphere. And it also has a very definitive sort of ending. It doesn't sort of fade out, which again adds a bit of the cheesiness, but you need some cheese. And that's so Mandala, as I mentioned earlier, it's very free, very lyrical. It's sort of hard boppy, very up tempo. Drums are taking on a bit more precedent as well. He's really going for it here. And it builds up into this as well. It's sort of, I think it's the longest song. That might be the last one though. That is the last song, is the longest. But it's 8 minutes long, and for the first sort of 4 minutes, it's building up, and then after that, it is just completely sort of free. There's sort of sax wails that are like John Coltrane's, like his extended techniques, I believe he called them. I don't know, like the screams. That's the only way you can sort of describe them. And there's those in this. Maybe not quite as harsh, but they're in there, and it works. And it captures the sort of live elements of jazz. I don't know if this was recorded. I'd assume it was recorded like as a live studio set. They were all recorded at the same time playing. That would be the only way that makes sense to me. But this is like, you know, there's a real sort of fight between the band members in this song. And then, yeah, overarching all sort of eras of jazz. And then, so The Journey Home, the last song, which I think is a perfect title for this one. It feels nostalgic. That's the only way I can describe it. It's sort of the biggest and most sort of fleshed out piece. I feel like you could most easily add other instruments to this one because it's just sort of so set. It feels so sort of right, but equally if you had more, it might take away from it. I don't know. And again, there's a bit of wailing by Keith Jarrett, and it's funny, you know, and it adds a little something to it. It's just like a little, I don't know, it's like, you know, this is his well, it's his song. There you go. And it kind of, the title of it made me think of the sort of messaging of the album. Like, you know, is he reminiscing on like childhood? Because the photo is two kids. I don't know if that's him. Maybe it's Keith Jarrett and his like brother, sister, whatever. And you know, the whole album sort of feels like it is this kind of it's a journey. Like maybe it's like the journey through sort of life, and like, you know, finally going home, or he's just like figuring things out. It feels like a journey through like sort of eras of jazz. Maybe Keith Jarrett's sort of, maybe he's reminiscing on his career so far. I don't overly know much about him, but I think that adds to my sort of experience of the album. And if you don't know much about him, I'd say just go in blind. I think going in blind to a listening experience can definitely benefit it. You have sort of less sort of preconceptions. I mean, maybe in this case, the fact that he's saying I've only listened to it because Geordie Greep said it's a perfect 10, maybe that sort of had that. But I tried to go into it I went in with no expectations, sort of thing. I didn't know what it was going to be like. I knew it was going to be jazz, but I didn't know exactly what type of jazz. So yeah, I think go into it without much sort of research, and also I don't really know much about the other musicians. I did a brief bit to sort of see who they were. Very, very talented players, but this has made me want to go and hear more from this quartet, and that's what great music should do. It should make you want to find out about these musicians, explore more of their work, all their little side projects and stuff, and especially within jazz, you know. Everyone sort of offshoots everywhere, and I feel like there's been a sort of return to that recently, or at least with Geordie Greep, he sort of expresses that. Pardon me. You know, he's made this new sound band, and Cameron Picton's made his band after leaving Black Midi. I forget the name of it. It's like My New Band. I think it's just called My New Band. Clever, I suppose. And that, you know, there's constantly always the singer breaking off and making their own album, and it's always there's different sort of directions within music, and it's always nice to sort of hear how an individual person has developed, let alone a band. Obviously some bands develop together and have like eras and stuff like that. Not a Taylor Swift reference. But you know, it's just interesting to hear where they get their influences or where their sound matures. And yeah, especially within the jazz context. And this album gives you a bit of everything in terms of jazz, especially into like the late 70s, you know. There's maybe less so sort of elements of fusion, but you know, that's pretty sort of intense. And there's no like electric synth, there's no electric instruments at all, actually. It's a completely acoustic album, yeah. He's on the double bass, hang on, let me get his name. Paul Danielson, give him the credit. He's on the double bass, which sounds, a double bass always sounds so nice. I always hear Chick Corea's acoustic band and John Pastortucci, whenever he's on his big double bass, it just sounds so nice. It you know, there's like a softness to it, but it can get so like deep and so low, and it's just, yeah, lovely instrument. But yeah, the point of this, is it a perfect 10? That's for you to decide. I'm not going to say it is, I'm not going to say it isn't. I'm going to say it's you know, it's a great piece of music. I do find myself going back to it a lot, mainly because the atmosphere that it has, it's just so like, just so calming. but also can be intense, and it's just a very sort of whole project. You know, there's no sort of open ends or anything. I'm like, oh, I wish this sort of, you know, I wish this bit was longer, whatever. It's the perfect length, and that's that word, perfect. Yeah, just a really great project. And also, you know, I hope this sort of urges you to go and listen to it, and also explore recommendations from some of your favorite artists. I feel like that is a big thing nowadays, especially with interviews, like people like, you know, who you listen to, who inspired you for this, whatever. I always go and listen to those things because it makes you find out more about that artist who you're looking at the interview of, but also other bits of music that you maybe wouldn't have found out otherwise. And it sort of gives, listening to this album gives you appreciation for Geordie Greep's album. You can hear where he gets the sort of ideas in terms of like going back to heads after, like, you know, there'll be the main sort of motif at the start, and then sort of an extended section which still is fairly structured but mainly solos, and then it returns to it at the end, but maybe in a different sort of way. And you know, this happens in the new sound quite a lot, and it's, you know, again, the cheesiness as well. The new sound's pretty cheesy at times, you know, but it works. You need that resolution of like tension. You need different sort of textures or more familiar sort of sounds. You can't just be going a million miles an hour. You don't know when the one is, and then all of a sudden you're in like bar 47, and then, oh, we've all synced back up. You can't have that. And it feels like that's happening sometimes when you're listening to like Black Midi and like sort of prog musicians and stuff. But or well, free jazz, I suppose, because it would just be 10 minutes, and then at the end you get back to the head, and it's like, oh, that's the song. But you know, there's parts of that in this, but you know, you're sort of always brought back to familiarity, and you can hear what's going on. So yeah, that's sort of my breakdown. I mean, you know, first video, let me know your thoughts. Again, just a really great piece of music. That's the main takeaway, if anything. I'm not going to say if it's perfect. I'm not going to say if it isn't perfect. It's just a really great piece of music that you should go and listen to. So yeah, if you have any recommendations of things that I should listen to, then, you know, feel free to say. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one to start with, a jazz record, I think, for a first video, and you know, there's no lyrics to talk about. I'm also not like classically trained. I'm a drummer, so I can't really speak about sort of melody and everything, but I know what sounds nice, and you know, this sounds very nice. So yeah, and a general sort of audience isn't trained classically or well versed in instruments, so you know, it needs to be accessible. And I think this, yeah, that's what this album is. It's a great sort of entryway into many different things, many different eras of jazz. Like, I'm not going to name them, but I could probably go through and think of bands that do things similar in like a small section that you can go and sort of offshoot from. And that's just like, you know, it's a testament to Keith Jarrett's songwriting, and you know, hearing all these different influences. So yeah, that's it.